अब नहीं रहूँगा मैं दिल्ली में। मैं नहीं रहूँगा और आने वाले बंदों को भी मना करूँ दिल्ली मत जाओ। गाँव में जाएगी 2 रोटी कम खाओ।
नरेंद्र मोदी तक हमारी आवाज पहुँचा दो, हमें कोई तो व्यवस्था करे।
Nowhere in the world except in India did we witness such acute migrant workers' distress during the coronavirus pandemic. These images remind us how our migrant workers suffered with no work, no money, lakhs were forced to walk home, hundreds dying on the way. But many of these lives could have been saved if we had not forgotten the law of the land. Have you heard of the Inter-State Migrant Workmen or ISMW Act? It's a law that was enacted in 1979 to prevent the exploitation of interstate migrant workers, a law ignored by the centre and our state governments.
बंद कर रहे थे तो एक दाएं ऐलान कर दिया,
पूछ लेते हम लोग से भी। कभी 14 को बोलता है, फिर कभी 3 तारीख को बोलता है, कभी बोलता है 4 तारीख को। पब्लिक ऐसा थोड़ी चाहिएगा, कोई ऐसा थोड़ी कोई पैसा रखा है।
Under the ISMW Act, every establishment and contractor employing 5 or more interstate migrant workers has to register the establishment and the workers with the government. But RTI replies received by transparency activist Anjali Bhardwaj from the Labour Ministry exposed the Sarkar's apathy. Here are 4 stunning data points. 1. In the last 10 years between 2010 and 2020, only 84,875 interstate migrant workers have been registered under the Act. Employment data scientist Dr. Amitabh Kundu estimates that there are 2.1 crore interstate migrant workers in India, of which at least 61 lakh workers should have been registered under ISMW Act and not just around 85,000. 2. Delhi, where lakhs of interstate migrant workers are employed, did not register a single worker under the ISMW Act between 2015 and 2020. 3. In the last 10 years, only 1,993 contractors and just 372 establishments have been issued licenses under the Act. The number should have been in lakhs. 4. Action was taken against just 515 contractors and employers in the last 10 years for breaching the provisions of the ISMW Act, meaning next to nothing. Successive state and central governments have simply ignored the Act and failed to enforce it, allowing lakhs of migrant workers to be exploited, even more so during the COVID-19 pandemic.
कुछ भी नहीं है जी साहब, भूखे यहाँ पर क्या करेंगे?
कुछ नहीं है, पैसे नहीं है, बस पानी की बोतल ली थी एक, वो भी आधी खत्म हो गई है।
जब तुम लोग कर लोगे तभी तो नहीं
बोलते हैं, देखते हैं।
कर देना भाई की पैसा नहीं है कुछ।
Here is how the ISMW Act could have reduced the distress of our migrant workers. First, the registration of workers under the Act would have helped the government to keep a track of the number of migrant workers employed across India. During the lockdown, the central government has admitted in Parliament it had no clear idea about how many migrant workers there were or how many had lost jobs, how many were dying, how many needed urgent financial support. And if the government didn't have this basic information, then how could they have helped these lakhs of workers? All contractors registered under the ISMW Act must regularly provide details of migrant workers they employ. This is crucial data. Contractors failing to do this should have been taken to task, but the government has looked the other way for years. 3. Under the Act, establishments are supposed to provide accommodation and free clothing to workers.
चप्पल का बच्चों का?
चप्पल नहीं है ना अंकल, टूट गया ये। अब जाएंगे तो तय ले लेंगे, खुलेगा तो।
Clearly, in many cases, this did not happen. We saw lakhs of migrant workers returning to their villages because they did not have enough money to pay for their room rents in the cities.
अब नहीं रहूँगा मैं दिल्ली में। मैं नहीं रहूँगा, कम से कम हमारे ऊपर 30-40 हज़ार रुपये कर्जा हो गया है। अब हम रिक्शा वाले हैं, 30-40 हज़ार रुपये कमाएंगे तब तक हम पे 1 लाख हो जाएगा।
4. Establishments are also supposed to pay journey allowance to migrant workers if they travel to their villages. Again, we know this did not happen. Lakhs of migrant workers walked hundreds of kilometers as they did not have money to pay for railway tickets.
पैसे खत्म हो गए, खाने के लिए कुछ नहीं है, तब निकल लिए।
5. The Act also says if any registered migrant workers' rights are abused, then the government must provide free legal assistance to help them get compensation. But of course, this too did not happen. Other measures to support migrant workers during lockdown also proved to be inadequate. In May, the government started the Atmanirbhar scheme to provide free ration for migrant workers who had no ration card. But this scheme lasted just 2 months. In July, Prime Minister Narendra Modi extended the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana till November, promising free food grains to those who come under the Antodaya Anna Yojana and Priority Household or PHH ration card holders. But to avail of this, a migrant worker would need a ration card. The PM claimed that PMGKAY Yojana would help 8 crore migrant workers across the country. But the question is, how will a migrant worker in the city benefit from this scheme without a ration card?
हमारा मान यही है कि मेरे घर पहुंचा दो।
गांव में कुछ भी करेंगे, वहाँ पे मर जाएंगे तो हमें मंजूर है, लेकिन यहाँ पे नहीं, हमारे जेब में कोई रुपए नहीं है।
यहीं पड़े रहेंगे क्या? यहीं मर जाए हमारे बच्चे या हम?
The government to enact laws and announce schemes to serve our migrant workers but does not do enough to ensure that they actually benefit from them. Is that fair? For instance, shouldn't the government have extended the Atmanirbhar scheme for migrant workers well beyond June? Will the visible suffering of India's migrant workers be a wake-up call for the Labour Ministry and push them to actually implement the ISMW Act? We can only hope so.
कसम से मर जाऊंगा लेकिन अब लौट के नहीं जाऊंगा। हम अपने दोनों बच्चे लेके हमको नहीं मर जाएंगे। हम क्या हम दिल्ली में नहीं रुकेंगे?
वो तो है।